Good afternoon. Welcome to today's topic all about lead and don't lean on, and how can you create your team so that they are independent from you and still being very successful. So this is a topic that has come up with clients as well as on a lot of discovery calls that I've had with women over the past couple of months, where it's like, hey, you know what? I'm starting to get this leading thing going. So I see that I'm making progress. My boss is nowhere to find me. People can come and ask me questions. And yet my biggest thing is trying to get my team to work a lot more independently without me hand holding or over nurturing them or ending up doing a lot of the things for them. So this is going to be a topic for you if you are finding yourself maybe working a lot of extra hours because you are catching up on work for your team, making sure that everything gets done. Maybe it is that you are finding yourself like, oh, I don't really want to be too assertive, because if I'm assertive, that's going to come across as mean or I'm really bossy. And I don't want to be that too. I want to be a compassionate leader. I want to be the type of leader that everyone wants to work with. So if that's you, then this is a great video for you, because we're going to dive into some of the mistakes that you're making, at least 3 of the mistakes that I've seen a lot of women leaders make. And some of these are general, right? So if you're if you're not a woman, you're a man, or you're watching this video, there is still a lot of gold for you in here as well. So before I get into that, if this is the first time watching, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Drop in the comments where you're watching from. I am Kim Rijmakers. I am an executive advisor and leadership strategist, and I work almost exclusively with women leaders in the senior to executive levels, and we look at together transforming their leadership efficiency as well as their team performance. So let's dive into today's topic. So let's talk about how we could use more assertiveness, but also a little less hand holding, or as what I have seen some people, or even on LinkedIn here, posting of like, hey, this is like my work mom. And I've even had a client that had a team member was texting her like in the middle of the night. It's like, don't worry, mom, I'm back safe from my assignment. And you're like, she's like, yeah, they're calling me mom. I'm like, I'm not sure that's something to be proud of, because that doesn't really impart necessarily the authority that you want in your leadership, so that you get taken seriously and that you get your teams to do the work that is needed to be done and work independently. All right, so let's dive into the topic. Now, when we talk about mistakes, here's a couple of things that I have seen. When we talk about the hand holding, you find yourself more micromanaging the tasks. So this could look like you've got a team member who maybe you're working in a sales environment, and you want to make sure that they are heading toward in the right direction. So you're like, okay, I'm going to jump on calls with you with clients. You're going to come in here and tell me every week, how many calls have you done? How many calls are coming? What are your ideas? And you check in constantly with them to make sure that they're still on task. Where that is exhausting for you, but it can also very much really plateau your team member as well. It doesn't allow them any room to grow or make any mistakes. The second mistake that I often see is a really hesitancy in setting clear but also firm expectations, because you don't want to appear being too harsh or too bossy or too directive, right? A lot of women, we find ourselves in this situation where, hey, I want to be liked, and we confuse being liked with being respected. But we need to peel it back and start first with making clear, firm expectations and hold our team members accountable, because that is something that I've seen a lot of, that we just hesitate because, and I say I have done this in the past. It has taken work on my end as well, but it is so much better when you're leading a team and leading individuals and people to really set some clear and firm expectations. Okay, this is due at that point in time. This is what I expect of the quality of the work, the quantity of the work, etc. And the more clear you can make it, the more objective you can make it, the better the results will become in the end. And the third mistake is you might be choosing the wrong individuals or the wrong tasks to delegate. So that leads to a poor outcome. So if this is something that really needs your hands-on attention, or maybe it's something it's more of a strategic in nature of like, where are we going to take this department in the next 6 to 12 or 18 to 5 years, that is likely something that you want to be doing yourself and you don't necessarily want to delegate that. But if you are thinking like, all right, hey, like I've got this, my team isn't making its quarterly sales, so I'm going to work out for every single individual a plan for them to meet their quarterly sales, I would say that's a wrong task, because you should be delegating that to your team, because that allows them to problem solve. And the other side of it is, of course, maybe you've chosen the wrong people to delegate to. Maybe you're choosing the people you're like, hey, I'm constantly going to delegate to the person that I know is going to get it done. Well, that still means you're nurturing or micromanaging other individuals, because you're not giving them the opportunities for stretch assignments. Now let's talk about what that looks like in terms of the pain you might be experiencing, right? And what I've heard and what I've seen is there's a lot of frustration also on your part, because you're constantly having to monitor your team, which really burdens you. And like I said, it stifles and it limits your team's creativity. It limits their ability to innovate. It also limits your team members' ability to grow. So there are opportunities that are lost within your team because you've almost created them that they have to be dependent on you rather than being empowered. Now, I know that as I say this, some of you might be looking at me going like, well, hold on a minute, but I didn't choose this. But it's my team members that aren't stepping up to the plate. My team members aren't choosing to do things more proactively, to take the initiative. So in that case, here's what I encourage you to do is really ask yourself, is that true? Or because you believe you have a filter on as you look at your team members that they aren't capable of performing independently and getting tasks done on their own, that you have now essentially created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Another way you could look at it, and I've had leaders that I've worked with, this a couple of years ago with one of the executives I work with, she was exhausted. She was exhausted because she was working from first thing in the morning, as soon as she got up, till almost like the last thing at night. And she's just like, I want some of my life back. And what came out of it is a big chunk of this is she was overwhelmed with meetings, back-to-back meetings all day, because her team members had to come in and ask for, her okay on decisions. All her approvals went through her. And what turned out a big reason behind that was a fear that if her team would make mistakes, that would reflect poorly on her leadership, and she couldn't allow that. So for her, yes, she want to have an empowered and independent team. Definitely. That was where she thought she was working towards, except in reality, it was her own perception of, I just cannot allow mistakes, and it needs to be right, it needs to be perfect, it needs to get done, that really made her team very much dependent on her. And lastly, what you might experience as well in this, and what I've seen happen, is you have a really decreased overall team productivity and morale. Because really, think about yourself. I'm sure as a high achieving woman, you're used to like, hey, don't tell me all the things to do. As long as I know what I'm supposed to be doing, I can get there. But it sort of works against the grain of all of a sudden you're being managed almost within an inch of your life. Well, likely the same is happening for the majority of your team as well. Now, I do want to recognize really quickly at this point that individuals will have different needs in terms of how do they need to be managed. Yes, there are going to be some individuals that need a lot more steering, that are going to need a lot more guidance, that are going to need a lot more on the how to be able to complete their work. And let's be honest, there's probably a lot of teams and a lot of hidden talent within your teams of individuals that could do so much more if they were only given the chance, and also were allowed to make mistakes along the way. Because the reality is, we all learn so much more from our mistakes than that we do from from everything that went really well and that went perfectly. Okay. So here's where I want to have a shift for you. We're going to dive into more of a shift from how you can adapt your own leadership style so that it leads to more team autonomy and a higher satisfaction and productivity, as well as more success for both you and your team. So I'm going to share you a few steps here from within my leadership accelerator and my leadership edge method. If we want to go into more detail, of course, you can always reach out and we can have a conversation about that, because to fit everything in 15, 20 minutes is nearly impossible. And if you've got any questions as we go along the way, please feel free to drop them into the chat. I can see the chat live and I will answer your questions as we go. Or if you're watching this when I'm no longer live, I will still come back and answer your questions, of course. All right, so let's get into the first step. Let's talk about assertiveness in leadership. So I want to ask you, do you find yourself micromanaging because it's hard to trust that the tasks are going to be completed to your standards? So when we talk about assertiveness really should mean, and especially in leadership, should mean clear and direct communication of what are your expectations. I remember personally as I was leading teams, that especially when it came to, well, I tried to use clear, direct communication at all times. However, one of those really important moments, or think about your employee evaluation moments or your performance, I call the performance reports, or the performance evaluations, right? We all go through them at least once a year, if not a couple times a year. And one of the things that I ensured was that when we talked about KPIs and things that my team members needed to achieve, I was very open and clear with each team member that I wanted these to be as objective as possible and as clear as possible, so that there was no room necessarily for misinterpretation or a different interpretation based off of personal preferences, because it allows both yourself but also the team member to know exactly what is expected of them and what they need to do in order to achieve high performance. It's about also really being respectful, but also firm with ensuring that everyone on your team really understands their own roles and responsibilities. And if they don't, it's also on you to make sure that you start bringing in that clarity. Because when you don't, it gets to be very hard to hold your team members accountable. And what you're going to find is that you're going to get frustrated, they're going to get frustrated, and you're all sitting there with your hands in your air. And I know this isn't the case for one of my clients I've been working with over the last 6 months, where she had a team member that was really underperforming. And it was, all right, how do we address that? And it really became of like looking at it very clearly. What are the expectations that I have? And now let me very clearly and directly communicate them to that team member, including having the deadlines, etc. But on the back end of that, also ensuring that you maintain the accountability by coming back and checking, all right, have you met your expectations on X, Y, and Z date? Yes, no. Make it as black and white as possible, because that makes the conversation a much more, it doesn't make it more easy in the sense that maybe the other person isn't going to like the conversation, but it does make it much more for you also to be much more confident. Hey, we had this agreement, you didn't meet that agreement, right? And that is also part of assertiveness. So I want you to think of assertiveness, for example, like a thermostat. So it can control the temperature of the room, just as your assertiveness will set the tone for your team dynamics. So if you find yourself being that shying away, and like we said at the beginning, maybe that you're finding it really hard to trust that tasks need to be completed to your standard, so you tend to really monitor single thing that happens and course correct like constantly, then that is going to be the dynamics within the team. Yet, if you can really take a step back and start being much more clear, much more direct in your communications, and then give your team the space to complete it or make the mistakes on their way to completion and have some lessons learned, then what you're going to see is the team dynamics are going to shift. So just like a thermostat, you can prevent the environment from becoming too hot or too cold or too, what do you say, too inefficient and not getting results, or add in that assertiveness and keep your team balanced and highly productive and likely highly successful. Now, if you're finding yourself, okay, I don't really want to, let's dive into step two here. If we find yourself going, oh, I don't know if I really want to delegate important tasks, I want you to start thinking about identify the tasks that are suitable for delegation by assessing the impact on the project and the capabilities of your team members. Now, you might have team members that are absolutely fabulous. They have got loads of experience. They are proactive. They take initiative, etc. So they are capable of stepping up and taking on more responsibility and delivering a higher quality of product. You may also have other team members that need a lot more guidance. So then the types of tasks that you would delegate to those individuals are, of course, going to be much more really task oriented, and even possibly including the how to do that. But I want you to see delegation not only as an opportunity to like get things off of your plate, which yes, that can be helpful. It can also move you from a place of being constantly in operational firefighting mode and allow yourself to elevate into more of a strategic mode within your team, within your organization, but also see this as a really key moment of team development. Because let's not forget that one of those important tasks when it comes to your leadership is also to identify future talent and start creating succession plans, which means you need to develop your replacement. You need to create a pipeline of future leaders. And delegation can be an incredible tool to do that because it allows them to experience responsibilities at their own level of readiness for it, not just also being thrown in the deep end should they be promoted into that role, for example. So I want you to think about delegation like a coach who's deciding which player to pass the ball to at a really crucial moment in a game, right? If you choose the wrong player, oh my goodness, they might play the ball out of bounds and there goes the opportunity for a win. If you choose the right player, they have the skills, they have the drive, they have the mindset, but they have the ability to lead the team in that moment to a win. And that is also going to build trust and capabilities within your team. Now, let's talk about the third step when we talk about building a self-sufficient team. So, I remember, and I don't know, I can't remember where I read it or what company it was, but a company that actually pulled away and last minute without any notification, pulled all of their project managers out of the office and took them on a week like retreat or something like that. Of course, there's a bit of panic, right? Could you imagine showing up at work on Monday morning and being told, like, hey, you need to drop your project and you're coming off a week with me? I think I'd have a little bit of a heart attack, I'll be honest, even now, right? But it was really, for me, I remember when I read this, the point was that for the leaders that had taken those project managers out of the environment, it was, if your project cannot continue without you being physically there and constantly having your presence there, then you haven't set your project team up for success. And that always stayed with me. So for me, it's always been a goal to make sure that regardless of whether I am or I am not there, my team can still function. I don't want to be that irreplaceable leader. I don't. That's the God honest truth. I do not want to be the irreplaceable leader. I want to be one that could be replaced when it needs to happen. Why? Because it allows both myself to manage my own workload and my stress level, and it also really ensures that the team can develop competence. So a lot of focus comes at this moment in time on training and development in order to boost your team's competence, to make sure that they have those essential skills that are needed to function even when you're not there. So if you're the type of leader who is still calling in every day to check in on your team, or you're still like, I'm only an email away while you're on vacation, you haven't managed this step yet. You haven't built a self-sufficient team. And I know what that's like from a team member's perspective, because as the senior leaders, I had my own leader checking in with me every single day while they were on vacation, to the point where I just said, I don't think you have a vacation. Like, I've got everything under control. I know what to do if something were to go sideways. I know who to go for advice that isn't on vacation. So now take a holiday, right? I found it personally, having that experience from that leader, very irritating, because it signified for me, like, well, they must not trust me to be able to do the job. The other side of that story is more that they couldn't trust themselves, that they weren't needed in that moment in time, or that the team, that she had created a self-sufficient team enough that they were able to complete their work even when she wasn't there. So when you are in this step, I want you to really look at ways of, how do I continue to train and develop my team members' competence across the different functions and responsibilities that we have within your team? Make sure you have regular and constructive feedback that you can give back to your different team members, so that they can correct their course, and they also gain confidence in their abilities. Because here's what happens. If you let's think of trees, right? Trees love to grow far up, most trees, yes? But what happens to a tree if you all of a sudden have a plateau, right? Maybe it's growing up against a roof of a garage, or maybe it's like you have what do you call it? Like an extended roof that comes out for shade. That tree can't grow any further, so it's going to start growing sideways. Well, that's what happens to your own team. If you are continuously going to nurture them, if you're going to you don't want to delegate them or train them or develop them, you have stunted their growth so that it cannot go any further. So when it comes to, and continuing on this in the vein of trees, but moving it on to plants, also think about, your plants. They need good soil, they need light and water to grow independently. But your employees are going to thrive when they get guidance, they get feedback, and that they are trusted. So I want to ask you right now, I've got this little fly flying around here. Do you want to continue feeling overwhelmed by micromanaging, and you feeling like, my team just isn't able to work independently? I need to over nurture them in order for them to do their jobs? Or would you rather be the type of leader who's leading a self-sufficient and empowered team? Because I can tell you, I know which type I would want to be. So here's the moment you get to choose. So if you're ready to choose and to transform your leadership style and create a team that does excel independently, then I want you to DM me Accelerator, and we're going to have a conversation just on where you're at, what's going on, and I will give you some strategies that will start to lead you to that process. So again, there's a couple of, I'll just summarize the 3 steps here once again. The first step is, I want you to start embracing more assertiveness. So again, being more clear and direct in your communication and of your expectations. Number 2, identify the tasks that are suitable for delegation by assessing their impact on the project and the capability of your team members. And number 3, you want to focus on training and development to boost your team's competence, so that they know that they can and they will be needing to do their work self-sufficiently and independently. All right. If you've got questions, you feel free to always drop them in the comments, or you can drop them DM me for questions as well. And again, if you're interested in going more in depth on this and having a conversation of how can these 3 strategies plus so many more, because I've only just shared like a tip of the iceberg from my Leadership Edge method, then you want to take this and DM me Accelerator, And we're going to have a conversation and go more in depth on your own situation and how you can apply this to your situation today and to your career and to your leadership. Thanks so much for listening, and I will catch you.